WTAN, Clearwater, Tampa Bay. WDCF, Dade City, Tampa Bay. WZHR, Zephyr Hills, Tampa Bay. Listen.
Good morning. Welcome to Dispatch Radio. Brought to you by theGlobalDispatch.com. Keeping truth in the headlines, one story at a time. I'm Brandon Jones. This morning, Robert Harriman, our co-host, is taking the morning off. You've got me flying solos. Bob gets some well-needed rest and recuperation. With me this morning, my son, the executive producer in training, Jacob Jones. How are you this morning?
Doing pretty good, thanks.
He's been pretty perky this morning, folks. You've been adequately warned. He has woke up bright and early to be here with us. So we have a very busy show this morning. We have several different guests that are going to come on. We're going to definitely get a chance to catch up with Mike Smith from MediaMikes.com about the movie season. We're talking about some of the summer movies and the upcoming fall movies. We have Amy Solly coming in from the Pavel Conservatory over at the Strass Center. She's going to catch us up on the different acting and theater programs that's going on over there. Just a ton of resources and things for you here in the Tampa Bay area. Well, this morning, I'm going to be joined by Majid El Shafi. He is a human rights activist. He's going to talk to us about his organization, One Free World International, the situation in Egypt, the crisis in Syria, what's going on with Coptic Christianity, and his conversion and testimony accordingly. So I think we're waiting for him to call in here soon, and he'll be joining us to talk about that. So before I get to that, Jake, you had kind of an interesting experience. I want to get to the Syria thing, and we'll start the ball rolling a little bit because everybody's talking about this. So I think America has a hard time even understanding the violence and the persecution that's going on over there. And you had been working with me on a video and kind of had a pretty traumatic experience because it's like thrust in your face. So tell us what some of your thoughts and your feelings were.
Well, I mean, I know today, especially with technology, and I mean, we have these video games. Some of them are really violent, but I mean, watching some of these videos, I mean, these people, I mean, this sounds pretty harsh. They're just straight up evil. They pulled these people out of a car and shot them just because they don't believe what they believe. And, I mean, for me, that was a shock because, you know, I like to play those shooting video games. And, you know, those movies are awesome and all, but this is real life. Somebody actually lost their lives. And it's beyond me that, I mean, especially with the Syria situation, that, you know, let's attack a country that attacked itself.
Yeah, I think that there's an interesting dilemma with a civil war and that we're going to get in and take a side. I made the comparison to someone, see what you think of this. I said, imagine in the middle of the Civil War, where you have the Confederacy, and suddenly another country rolls up and says, hey, we're here to fight with them, and we're just going to start launching bombs over the border and in New York, and we're going to try to help the South win here. I don't think that really would have gone well with either side. I think both sides would have been like, whoa, what do you think people think you're doing? So it's funny because a lot of people are going through what Jake's gone through. He was very emotionally moved by this. And unfortunately, there's a lot of videos that are surfacing. These groups put these videos out there as part of their propaganda. It's how they recruit new members to these jihadist regimes and groups. I spoke to a lady Thursday night who was just very emotionally distraught, not by just this one video, but she had seen the one where they had butchered one of the Assad soldiers and actually engaged in an act of cannibalism. And that's the actual video that Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin made reference to when he was condemning America's siding with the rebels. So it's a very tricky situation, and I really want to get to that in more detail a little bit later on. So let's go to the first part. Let's catch everybody up on where we are. So we're going to open the story. It's probably still the headline. We're going to probably have that headline move today, but it is really kind of where we are. We left it as the headline because that's where we really are in the Syria war. I'm just going to call it for what it's going to be. And that is the Senate Foreign Relations Committee did go ahead and vote, and it voted 10-7 to move forward. So that means now it will go to the Senate this next week, and there'll be a lot more debate and discussion. This will not be going away anytime soon for those of you that are already sick or frustrated of hearing about it. And you will see more discussion. You will have more information and more sort of contradictory details on Syria, what's going on, and the weapons that are there. So let me kind of break the mold here and ask Bill to just throw us to break for one quick second. Just run a Stout Auto ad. We're going to come right back and go from there.
This is Brandon from Dispatch Radio, and I want to tell you about my friends over at Stout Auto. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't stand car repair shops. I hate hearing about all the things that are wrong with my car. Even if they're true, I just want my oil changed. Now, the only thing worse than car repair is having to take it back again when it breaks down for what I just had done the first time. Now, recently, I had some work done on my mother-in-law's car. Spent a pretty penny, only to have the same thing start all over again. Now, this person may have meant well, and I don't really have any ill will, but I learned a valuable lesson, that I can trust Jody and his team over at Stout Auto. Not only did they fix everything, explain what else needed to be done, they did it in a professional manner with estimates that I could understand, and I left feeling that my daughter, if she took her car in there for an oil change, wouldn't come home with a $600 bill. One trip, one good repair, I didn't have to go back. Now, they've been in business in Clearwater for over 4 years. 18300 US 19 North. It's in Clearwater at 727-216-6622. Now they have a new location that's off Belcher at 1801 Belcher Road, just 1 block north of Ulmerton. Give them a call. That's 727-400-6955. 2 locations, going to do you right, get you in and out. Tell them the Global Dispatch sent you.
You're listening to Dispatch Radio, sponsored by theGlobalDispatch.com.
Welcome back to Dispatch Radio. We're trying to get one of our guests on the line right now, but we're going to go ahead and run through theGlobalDispatch.com. Obviously, everybody's been talking about the Syria thing, so let me break down a couple of facts that I want to keep in mind for you. I did an article that talked about the different questions that you should be asking, and you should be asking your representatives to be raising. These are the different things that, to me, is the pivot points in the decision. So first thing is why does the use of these chemical weapons matter now? If you didn't know already, the weapons had been used back in May. Now, the allegations in May were that the rebels used them, that they got their hands on these weapons during this 2-year civil war that's been going on in Syria. This is not something that's new. If you're frustrated that you didn't know about this, it's okay. America's press has not really been covering it. There's been a lot of other crises with Libya and situation in Egypt, of course, as well as, our presence in Afghanistan and Iraq. So it's taken a back burner. Now, with that said, the use of the chemical weapons does change the game plan for most political points, because the other skirmishes have been through just other attacks, typical terrorist attacks with shoulder-firing missiles, machine guns, a lot of AK-47s, those kinds of things. And then earlier this year, the U.S. had moved through the State Department, John Kerry and the Obama administration, about actually supporting the rebels. There actually was a movement where we were giving them military aid. Now, military aid not being weapons. I'm talking about stuff of, Humvee-type stuff, Jeeps, a lot of armor, a lot of Kevlar vests, night vision goggles, a lot of those kinds of things is what was approved up until that point. At this point, during the 2-year campaign, 100,000 people have died. Now, that's going to be both sides. That's going to be government people, rebels. It's going to be civilians, women, children, everyone. So roughly 1,500 are alleged to have died through the chemical weapons. Now, the next question is, what's the role going to be of all the other world players? Syria is unique. Libya had kind of always been on its own. Gaddafi had burned bridges to most of the other world players, so most of the other countries didn't have a whole lot of interaction with Libya. Compare that to Syria, which is extremely crucial with their relationships with Iran and Russia. Iran is a similar group of Muslims. They come Shiite versus Sunni. Sunnis are the ones that are in Saudi Arabia. That would be the Saddam Hussein regime. Many of the others are called Wahhabi Muslims. That's the different divide. They generally don't like each other. They generally shoot and kill each other. So hence we had the Iraq and Iran war. That was a Sunni versus Shiite war. So if I lost you yet, Jake, you're doing okay. I think he's all right. Okay, well, we're going to try to keep going through this. So the question is, if we start picking a fight with Syria, how long before Iran wants to jump in, support their ally? And more importantly is Russia. Russia still has a presence there. They have a base. They actually still have a presence in that area, and they have a lot of interest in keeping that region open for their side of support. They don't want the Americans to have total control. They don't want to lose any leverage and that kind of thing. So it definitely also puts us into a quandary of, should we help terrorists? Should we help these groups of Islamists? You'll hear Al-Qaeda used a lot, but unfortunately that's not even an appropriate name for these groups. They don't go by Al-Qaeda, the ones that are even there. Al-Nusra and some of the others are the ones that you have seen in these videos. We mentioned a couple before our quick little break there. And these are the ones that have attacked Catholic priests, beheading Catholic priests. They are executing military execution style Assad soldiers, anyone that they capture. These videos are as recent as last week. So the violence there doesn't paint the picture of having any sort of good resolution. And then the last thing I want to get to, I think is really important, is what happens to all these weapons? What happens to these chemical weapons? Do you really think that we're going to be able to unearth all of them? One of the problems in Libya is once we laid waste to Libya and removed Gaddafi and all of that, is much of the weapons and the munitions and the dangerous shoulder-firing missiles and all those different things fell into the hands of some of these Islamic groups. So I don't think that we want to have the al-Nusras and the al-Qaeda types having these kinds of weapons. And I don't see how we're going to be able to take control of that. So I don't think that we're going to have Majid al-Shafi on after all. So we're going to continue through some foreign policy discussion headed into the bottom of the hour. So if you would like to call and maybe offer up your opinion, you want to chime in and help drive things, this is a great opportunity for that. The number is 727-441-3000. 727-441-3000 or 1-866-826-1340, 1-866-826-1340. So, you know, Jake, I know we're going through a government class right now, and we haven't really got into articles of war and that kind of thing yet, because that's something we talked about even this morning before the show. So when you see us putting our ships there and we start launching missiles, do you perceive that as an act of war?
I mean, yes. We're attacking a different country, so I mean, yes, it's gonna come across as an act of war. I mean, America plays it up as a control. This is how I look at it, as a controlling parent, almost like, you know, you're not doing what we say, so we're gonna take you out, basically. Honestly, I mean, in the Middle East especially, some of these different, you know, I've seen a little bit of these videos that some of these soldiers have and things, and that's all great. I mean, you're fighting, you know, some of these younger, you know, they're not experienced soldiers, nothing, don't really have a lot of training. I mean, so, yeah, it's going to be kind of like an easy waste, but, I mean, if we're getting Russia involved, of all things, they are a pretty, I would consider them a pretty great power. I mean, these are trained soldiers. They know what they're doing. You know, I wouldn't. It's just beyond me. I wouldn't be doing anything like that. It's not our business to be there.
As the commander-in-chief, do you feel he has the power to tell the military to, let's say, well, let's look at it this way. Let's assume the skirmish is in Saudi Arabia and they're an ally, and the Saudi government says, hey, listen, we need your help. Can you guys start running flyovers and drop bombs on this one area because those are, quote, bad guys. We've deemed them as bad guys. Is that okay?
Well, that's a difficult one, but I think it's up to us whether we deem them bad or not. Because I mean, if you take the side of the Syrians, we are the bad guys. Right. So I mean, if you're telling me, so if this other country comes and they're telling us, you know, these guys are attacking us, this and that, well, those guys see you as the bad guys. So it's really hard to, you know, come up with an accurate way of doing this. I don't like the thought of saying Obama basically saying that he's going to do what he wants with whether the Congress says so, because that's what I've basically learned through this government class is the different stages of how things work and how decisions are made, or within the three different branches of government. And I think that if one person has the ability to make a single decision by himself, I think that's where one of the biggest problems with any country. I mean, we even saw this in World War II with Hitler. He's the one head in command, and he's making all the decisions. So I mean, things are liable to go wrong at that point.
Yeah, I wanted to go down this road of discussion because this is the kind of political banter and the back and forth and the discussion and the moral debate of good versus evil and good guys versus bad guys. This is what our founders did not want to happen. Our founders didn't want us to be having to discuss these things, and there's always going to be good and evil, and what is our role, and what should we do, and all those things. And it was laid out very, very clearly in Article 2 of the Constitution. And the Constitution just clearly states, and you're not going to believe it, how little the president is actually allowed to do. Because since Teddy Roosevelt, these powers, if you will, have been written in pencil with a whole list of other things that he's allowed to do now that we willingly accept. But clause says, this is Section 2, the president shall be the commander-in-chief of the Army and the Navy, the militia of several states, and called into actual service of the United States, he may require the opinion in writing the principal officer of each executive departments upon any subject relating to the duties of those respective officers. He shall have the power to grant reprieves and pardons for the offenses against the United States, except in the case of impeachment. In other words, he is a commander-in-chief of the military. He appoints people to his cabinet, and he can pardon people. That's it. Now, our president actually does one thing, which I think is funny because we've accepted other things in the past, was our president doesn't really submit a budget. Congress just sort of has this, quote, continuing resolution, and the fact that he's involved with messing up the economy so much in the past. So if our president actually would not play the political gameplay with the economics and allow ourselves to stop printing money and actually balance the books, we might be in a better case in that regard. But he has to go to Congress and have what's called a declaration of war. Now, the semantics there, especially by the neoconservative groups that like the military presence around the world, tend to dance around this a little bit because we have had military interactions in the globe. They always go back to the Thomas Jefferson example, but many of those cases usually involve more to the story as far as we were attacked, their interests were directly attacked. We had people that were physically being put in harm's way, and we had to address it by supporting those people. We didn't just go in and stampede through other countries. Unfortunately, that's kind of the thing that began in our 20th century. So we have a long track record, and just like our judicial system, it seems like precedent matters more than the Constitution and the rule of law. So with that, I want to add a couple of disturbing factors. If you haven't seen, I haven't shared it with Jake, John McCain just wants to blow everybody up. I mean, his constituents were even calling him out on this, and he kind of rolls his eyes and whatever. Jake, I don't think there's any sand that John McCain has seen that he doesn't want to bomb. No,
I mean, I told you this the other day. The whole Republican Party just seems like a bunch of teenagers with M80s is all they are. They're just, excited to blow something up.
I'm a little concerned because we're at Clearwater Beach here in Florida, and the sand is pretty white. But if it turns beige or kind of a dark tan, we might have to be worried that Lindsey Graham and John McCain aren't going to want to bomb Florida.
No, they don't understand how bad it is here in Clearwater. They don't know about it yet.
Oh, word hasn't gotten back. Hasn't gotten back to the GOP about how bad Clearwater sand is. So we may have a little bit more time. Folks, I know that this is heavy politics stuff and world policy and all of that, but I tell you what, most people don't know what's going on. I brought a paper with me because I was going to touch on this. The local paper had run this. This was last Sunday's paper, and it begins with a special cover on Syria. And it says 8 questions that you're too embarrassed to ask. The first question is, what is Syria? Not even where is Syria, what is Syria? It clarifies in the first sentence that Syria is a country. We're admitting that our education system is so incompetent that we have to tell our citizens that Syria is even a country. Not where it is in the Middle East. Let's just begin by telling them it's an actual country. That's kind of a sad state of affairs, don't you agree? And you're not even out of high school yet, and you're like, wow, we have really got a doomed population of kids. We talked about it in our church on Wednesday. It came up very briefly about the fact they don't even teach geography in school. They have so little geography, and even the private schools are only learning geography that's relevant to the other curriculum. They're not really learning, standard geography like I had to memorize every state capital and all that kind of stuff. You guys don't really get too much of that, do you?
No, not at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Very, very sad. So we are going to move away from there just a bit. I would like to touch on Egypt because Syria has become an incredible distraction from Egypt, and nothing has changed there, folks. You need to know that Coptic Christians are being executed, that they are being drug out of their house, that the rape and pillaging is still going on in Egypt, that the situation in Libya is just chaos, that the situation now in Syria, you start to question, how has any of this been a good thing for our country? From a president that wanted to escape foreign policy and didn't even want to discuss these things. So, hey, listen, we have a special guest on the line. Bob, are you there?
Hey, brother, how you doing?
Well, look at this, calling in on his day off. We can't even take a break from Dispatch Radio.
Nah, man, Dispatch Radio's in the blood, bro.
What's on your mind,
Hey,
bro?
yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. I heard you talking about Syria, and prior to the show coming on, I was watching C-SPAN, and I think about 1 or 2% of the people that were calling in were actually in favor of our military intervention into Syria, our proposed military intervention. And I just wanted to point out that, John McCain held some town halls, and he really took a battering from his constituents. And there's a story that was covered on the globaldispatch.com last night where Utah Senator Mike Lee, he put out a comment on his Facebook page, said during his recent town halls, this week my office received numerous phone calls, emails, and letters about the Syria issue. Only 1.7% of those that contacted his office supported the intervention. So that leaves an astounding 98.3% of Mike Lee's Utah constituents to say, no thanks.
And
I just wanted to put that out there.
No, I think you're bringing up a very valid point, and people need to be active. Listen, you can't sit on your hands, folks, and everyone is always intimidated about it doesn't matter, why should I call, why do I get involved? I'll be honest, I've talked to some of these folks, I have called personally. You'll be shocked at how few people call. And if you don't want this to happen, you need to call. It doesn't matter if you have a Democrat or Republican or even an independent representative. We're heard globally through the internet now, so it doesn't matter what state you're in. You can encourage. Look, Mike Lee knows his constituent. He's not at risk. He's in a conservative thing. He knows that 98%, but he's taking those calls and he's voicing that. Do the same thing. Call every single one of them and say, listen, no. And if you do want to do it, fine. Then call and say, I side with John McCain and Lindsey Graham. But that's how America works. And I can't stand it when the politicians are standing up there acting like this is something that we want to do and they know better than us. Bob, last thoughts?
No, I just agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, they are our representatives, and if you don't say anything, you get what you get. Then
you get what you.
All right, bro. Well, hey, Jake, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
We're filling a little bit of time here. We're getting ready to transition away from some of the foreign policy into some of the other news headlines on the globaldispatch.com. Bob, you need to take a break. Put on a few good men. Put your feet up. Maybe mix in some Jericho, and try to have a good day today.
Well, yeah, I will. You take care, brother.
All right, man. The globaldispatch.com, if you haven't been to our site, if you want to get a little crash course here, you'll see there's different headlines that come across, and there's a bar there. There's different categories. You click those, you go to the subcategories, and so on and so forth. In a search box, you can type any sequence of words, and those will search the valid stories that pull that up. But everything across the whole site is recognized as news by Google. We're now competing with the big news agencies, whether it be traditional ABC, CBS, NBC, now CNN, Fox, what have you. And it is the kind of thing where I really have to say I need your help. I really do. I really like YouTube, please share things to your Facebook page, like things to your Facebook page, tweet things if you're into Twitter. Put things on LinkedIn and Reddit and these kinds of things, because social media now is turning the tide of information on its head. And I've spoke to someone who actually talked about maybe having me speak about the information in this change, because people now, I think, are liking or sharing things like through Facebook, Twitter, whatever, but only based on like the headline and maybe a little bit of a blurb. They have no knowledge of information of what the story even contains. And it's going to become more and more imperative that when you do care about something, that you try to put it out there to your folks. You see something from my pool of people, and you move it to your pool of people. And then someone from there will move it to their pool of people, and so on and so forth. And you say, please read this. This is the information. This is the truth. Because if you don't do that, and people are voting on the wrong information, or they don't have any information. Because let me tell you what, walk around your work and ask people what Benghazi is. You'll be lucky if they even know what country it is, if they even heard of it. I had someone who says, what do you mean, what's Benghazi? Well, it's not a person. It's a place. They knew nothing. So we went to a war. Jake defined a war for us a few moments ago. We destroyed a country, Libya, removed a dictator, went to move guns around. It went very, very badly.
You don't even know where they're at.
The ambassador is killed with other servicemen that left their post to help him. And Americans have no idea what the name of the town even is. Something is seriously wrong. And that's the role that you can play. Even if you're not going to pick the phone up or write a letter or an email to your congressman or senator, you need to figure out how to get engaged with information so you're moving it around to help people in your circles. Help people understand what's really going on. If they're not going to listen, fine. Maybe they got a bucket on their head. You're not going to change it. But you know what? I guarantee you have more than one person in your Facebook circle. You have more than one person on your Twitter following or whatever. Okay?